We continue through our season in review for the Arizona Coyotes. On today's episode, we are going to talk about one of the top centers for Arizona in Barrett Hayton. How did he impress? What does he need to work on? All that discussed on today's episode of Locked On Coyotes.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlak. On today's episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast, I want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to now get to our player review portion of our season in review before the Arizona Coyotes. And we're going to start with a player who spent a decent amount of time as the first-line center. Carl, we're going to talk about Barrett Hayton. And this is an interesting one because I think Hayton was getting a lot of crap going into the season, and I feel like people were so disappointed with how he kind of developed. But this season, I feel like he really grew into his own.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with that. There was definitely a lot of crap being thrown Barrett Hayton's way. I do also want to say there was a lot of people who were like, hey, going into the season, he's only 21. We probably shouldn't judge him yet. He is still well before his prime. He's not hitting right now, but that doesn't make him a bust. I think at the first game of the season, you, Mike, and myself were actually talking about Barrett Hayton and the fact that he would get a shot at the top line this year. And he got that shot and he ran with it.
Oh, he definitely ran with it. I mean, how amazing of an opportunity. You got someone as young as Barrett Hayton to be able to play alongside Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. And we've talked about those two players extensively, so that's why I'm glad we're able to talk about Hayton now.
Yeah.
Because, he still played a good role with that. I mean, was he also pretty lucky that he played alongside those two players? Well, yeah. But that helped. It helped his development a lot.
Yeah. He is a first-round pick. You expect him to be playing with the best players at a certain point. That's the ideal situation for, a player selected 5th overall. And, he made it work. We were talking last season about the fact that Travis Boyd, was able to make it work between, Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. Hayton stepped in and was, that and more.
He was that and more. We take a look briefly at some of his stats. Barrett Hayton did not miss a game this season. He played a full 82-game season with 19 goals, 24 assists for 43 total points.
So close to being a 20-goal scorer. Which would have been huge. Just huge.
It would have been huge, especially again with the two players you were going alongside with, who both were able to get that high. And if you look at the comparison, right? I'm gonna go through his previous 3 seasons. You have in the COVID year, 20 games, 1 goal, 3 assists. The initial post-COVID year, 14 games, 2 goals, 1 assist. Last season, 60 games, 10 goals, 14 assists. Was able so moving up, but still kind of he doubled. He essentially almost doubled his points.
Yeah, and that was half a season on the top line, because he started off on what would probably be the 4th line for the Coyotes.
Yeah. I mean, everydayers that listen to this show are kind of already know that
the Coyotes line.
The line system that Barrett puts in place doesn't make a lot of sense because the first line sometimes you have the first line of players sometimes slotted in at the fourth line and you have like third line players. It's like all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, he would be like the line that would play the least amount of minutes to start things off.
Yeah, he was averaging like I think closer to like 14 for 14 through 16 for like a lot of the season. And then he just kind of like put in the work. He clearly didn't complain because it wasn't a scratch despite being a young guy. And he got the promotion to the top line and like he made sure to like generate on there. Even without Nick Schmaltz, Clayton Keller played phenomenally well with Barrett Hayton.
Exactly. Like, and I think, you need to focus on you need to focus on that part and his development. And you mentioned it, right? He was getting trying to look at his time on ice. His average time on ice this season was 14-15, which is the highest. So he was able to spend the most time on ice as compared to any of the previous seasons.
Yeah. But like if you're looking at like game to game, like some of the latter games, he is getting 20 plus minutes. Like his role definitely increased. And I think it's great. I think he is like all throughout Barrett Hayton's development, his defensive like aspects have been kind of like talked about. Like even when he was drafted, like the talk was kind of like, yeah, he may not be a scorer, but he's going to be like a good solid two-way center. I think that kind of showed, and like him getting that top line like minutes really made that line like a much better unit.
And I think a lot of people going in, not just like going into this season, but just kind of like in the general mindset of Barrett Hayton. They looked at when he was drafted. He drafted first overall in 2018.
Fifth overall.
Sorry, first round. Sorry, my brain is in the first round, fifth overall. That's where I was getting at in 2018. The Coyotes still have not got a first overall pick, but we'll see about that later. But have not gone there, and I feel like a lot of people was like, "Oh, he's not really a highly skilled player. He's just a bigger guy. Like, what are you going to get out of him?" Like,
yeah, like I don't know. Barrett Hayton always seemed like a player who, like, you could really get a gauge on someone when you talked to them about Barrett Hayton, especially as a prospect. Like, I swear there are people who are like, he's not going to be good. Versus, I think last season, like before last season, someone was like, he's a dark horse candidate for Calder. Like that is such a like wide gap, and it really does kind of make you question like what kind of player is he going to be. And going into the season, a lot of people were like, "Yeah, there's high expectations. He didn't hit them last year. Is he a bust?" And you're like, "Nah."
it also really tells you the high discrepancy rate between scouts on what they really valued about him, about his kind of play.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think the scouts who wanted like a 40 goal scorer potential like didn't really like him, but like I think one of the draft profiles compared him to like Kopitar. I'm like, I'll take a Kopitar. Like I will absolutely have a Kopitar on my team.
Oh, if he ends up being almost exactly like Kopitar, like say in a year or two down the road, I consider, oh yeah, great draft pick right there.
Yeah. I do think people like, I remember at certain points during his development, like the award I could see him winning the most is the Selke. And like having that as a top line player, I will take that every single day.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick step aside real quick. We're going to get a little more into the Barrett Hayton talk, and maybe talk about some of the things we still feel like he needs to work on as he grows as a member of the Arizona Coyotes and as a potential top line center. We're going to get to all that and more in just a minute. But first, a quick word from our sponsors on the show.
Are you looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and calories? Then you need the best tasting protein bar ever. Built, you gotta try this. If you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, then I've got just the thing for you. Built bars and built puffs. Built bars are a healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so good. You are going to think that they're good for you. You really gotta try this. Um, the they come in plenty of unbelievable flavors. You got churro, you get the peanut butter brownie, and one of my favorites, cookies and cream. Really good with that chocolate coating. And you do not need to wait to get a box. For years, we've talked about ordering Built Bars on Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club while you can still get your specialty flavors on Built.com. That's right. You can head to your nearest Walmart today, walk over to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff.
So let's continue our conversation about Barrett Hayton, Carl. Let's talk about, maybe some things that Hayton still needs to work on because he's still young, right? You talked about his age. You mentioned it. He is only, 20,
22?
22. He's 22 years old. Like, he is really young.
Yeah. I think kind of one of the issues I had with this game was he took a little too many penalties for my liking. He is a vital piece of the Coyotes, especially in like the latter half when like the team didn't have Bugstad. Like Hayton was the go-to penalty killer face-offer in a lot of situations, but 42 penalty minutes, bit more than I would like for a guy who has like that big of a role.
And that makes sense, looking at things in that regard. I think another thing too, in my mind is I think a couple times, and I think he's been getting better at it, but I feel like he can still do it a little bit, work on it a little bit more, in the sense that does get a little bit of overconfident in some situations,
Yeah,
which ends up leading to unnecessary giveaways,
sure.
which you expect that out of a young player, but when you start reaching, this next range, he's going to, 22, 23, it's like, okay, start working that a little bit more.
I mean, overconfident is just what you call like cocky when things go bad. Like if he was just like that kind of player with like swagger, it'd be fine. But he is like, there's that adjustment period. You learn what things you can and can't do in the NHL.
Yeah.
And especially with the minutes he's getting, the competition he's facing, like he's got to cut out some of the cheap tricks.
Yeah. And I'm sure he'll slowly get there. And I think what helps is I think Bear is reeling him in a little bit. I think that's what's helping him get there.
Yeah.
But he still has a little bit of ways to go on that. And I'm going to keep saying it. As someone who's only 22, he still has a lot of time to figure that out. There are players who still get overconfident and do the same mistakes at like 25, 26.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that he was able to work out things by the time he gets there, so the Coyotes can be like a well-oiled machine by the time they get to that. I mean, that's optimistically viewing, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely early. There's a lot of time for be like, oh, that's a thing he needs to work on. To that's a problem with his game. Like there's plenty of time before it gets there. And I do think it should be noted that like the last couple games he wasn't playing with Keller as much. Like they kind of split up that top line. So there's definitely like work that needs to be done. I feel like he should be making sure that his game is at the point where he is going to be with Keller the entire season.
Yeah. I think he should. I think yes, but I also think that he should have he can potentially be viewed as like an anchor point, so that if injuries get moved and Keller and Schmaltz have to move around on certain different lines, that Hayton could potentially stand as good as he is on his own.
Yeah. Like that's kind of the dream, that like Barrett Hayton plays as well with say a Matthias Michelli, a Lawson Krause, even a Christian Fischer. Like he can fit all of those roles. And sure, I'd love to have him on the top line, but if he can like slot into like a good shutdown position, that's all the better. Like he can potentially touch all areas of the game.
Because we've seen line shuffles happen throughout the season every freaking year.
Yeah.
Lawson Krause and Nick Schmaltz have been known to get injuries.
Yeah.
And that happens. And not only that, look, you have other players get injuries. Matthias Michelli, who was injured for a decent portion of the last season. And that causes players to move up and down because you want to be able to balance out those lines. And I feel like that's something that I really want to see Hayton grow in, and see is like, hey, like I want you to be able, yeah, you're definitely suited for a top line, but like, I want to see you shine in these areas too.
Yeah. And not only have Hayton shine, but have him elevate like the line mates.
Exactly. Because I feel like, yeah, he can be, let's say, like a rock star on like the third line and take all the glory, but then that doesn't really help everybody else.
Yeah.
You want to be able to if be as much of a playmaker as you're able to be.
Yeah. Like let's say Lawson Krause gets hurt, and you end up getting a Michelli, Hayton, Christian Fischer line. Like I want those games to be like some of Fischer's like best games. Like him getting the chance to play with Hayton should be like a great boost. And I think that Hayton is the kind of player who can do that. And that's not everyone. Like there are players who can just generate on the top line. And sure, that's great. It's good to be able to generate with the best. But if you can make people better than they are without you on every line, that's something truly special.
Yeah, I've seen enough players in an NHL struggle when they're not able to get, like 15, 16 minutes a game.
Yeah.
And that's a warning sign to me. If they struggle, like, yeah, cool, you're great on the top line, but what's going to happen when there's a massive shakeup? Like, how are you going to manage? Because we need to focus on the depth of the entire team. And you're right, Hayton is the player that we see, that we hope and we see, and we can see the potential in him of being that kind of player. We just I think next season, I just want to see more of that.
Yeah, like just do everything he did this year, but better. And the good thing is he is 22 years old. That is probably an accurate description of what his next season is going to be like.
Yeah, and what did you say earlier this week? That the peak of an NHL forward is what, 26, 27? So like 27 years old. He's got 5 years to figure kind of a lot of things out. And obviously I don't want to see those 5 years to figure everything out.
Sure.
Hoping we fix everything out before then, but he just, builds and builds upon those things over the next 5 years.
Yeah. And I mean, like this segment, we didn't really talk too much about like glaring weaknesses. Like there are no major holes in Hayton's game that I can see so far. Like everything is like, yeah, this is something you can work on. And granted, he's still young, but like that's a good sign that we're not.
Yeah, and those like, kind of head shaker penalties or those giveaways or something that we discussed as those things that he can work on, but you'd also expect out of a really young player, especially one that's on a rebuilding team like the Arizona Coyotes is. So.
Yeah. I will say this: every single Coyotes player took more penalties than I would like. Like Clayton Keller took more penalties than I want him to, because I do not want Keller to ever be in the box if he won like the Lady Bing, that'd be great for me. Like, have that.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to close our thoughts on about Barrett Hayton and his year in his year in review as we discuss his strengths, his weaknesses, and a little bit more. We're going to finish off our thoughts in just a moment, but first, a quick word from our sponsors. And today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So for next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So, Carl, let's finish off our thoughts about Barrett Hayton as we take a look at. I feel like the good way to close things off is taking a look at his contract. He still does have another year you can look at it, about $1.7, $1.8 million. So he's entering a contract year. So far, based off his performance last year and, with the hope that he builds off of this, how do you feel like, his long-term look is with Arizona?
That depends so much on what happens at the lottery.
I hear you.
It absolutely does. Because like right now, the Coyotes have Cooley in the pipeline. He is going to be like, free or like RFA status for a while. So you can imagine him being kind of cost controlled. But depending on where the Coyotes land, Barrett Hayton could like instantly become a third line center just out of that's where he is in talent.
Well, yeah, center depth is for the Coyotes. It's weird because it was such a struggle 2 years ago, and now we're like, wait,
Yeah.
so you're telling me that center depth maybe in about a year or two from now might actually just be so like godly that you don't know how to handle it?
And I really don't see at this point Hayton moving to wing. I don't. That feels weird. That feels like you're almost wasting his career, unless he like moves to wing and becomes like a 40 goal scorer or something. So I don't know. I feel like you can look to lock him up at this point. Like he's had a good year. Like he's got 1 year left. Maybe go moderate money for like 4 years.
Yeah, like a team friendly deal for a few years. See what happens with the lottery this upcoming year, as well as the development of Logan Cooley, which so far as we've seen could potentially be like a game changing center. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that really depends on it, but I feel like a team-friendly deal is really important in the case that, because you don't want to have to be stuck with them forever. I mean, stuck is a terrible word in this sense, but you don't want to have to be stuck with a contract you just can't get rid of in the case where you just can't afford to keep someone like him anymore.
Yeah. And I do think we talked about Hayton. We've talked about how he impressed. We've talked about how his weaknesses aren't, glaring. He's a very complete player, but he's also not, I don't think, a future superstar. Right. Like Keller was locked up for a reason. I don't think that Hayton necessarily is going to get that level of contract.
He is going to be a unrestricted free agent at the end of 2024. So we'll see what kind of deal is going to get put in place. So it's going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. He is. He's kind of. I was unsure if he'd be at UFA status. He seems to fit well. If he wants to stick around, go for it. Extend him.
Excuse me, I made a mistake. I was on the wrong line. He's going to be yes. I need to make that correction. My eyes just somehow took lines, and he's
Yeah, it happens.
arbitration eligible RFA.
Arbitration eligible, which is still like, if he didn't have arbitration rights, you can imagine like a much lower deal. Does, or let me ask you this: do you think he goes like as far as Kraus did before getting a deal? Because that was in the arbitration room.
I mean, like that's just like I don't think anything can go that far. I just I mean like although at the same time I have a feeling that Hayton is potentially maybe the kind of player that might end up making it as far to the actual arbitration itself. Not to say that not to say that he deserves to go to arbitration, but like maybe the Coyotes view his value differently than he views himself. Again,
Sure.
it's a possibility, but it's hard to say if it's going to go that far, especially because like I still need to see what he does next season in the contract year.
Sure. I will say this. He had a very good ladder. What would be like a third? Was it a half? Like his time on the top line with the Coyotes was great. He really turned around. He like upped his game to an unbelievable level compared to the start. If he could have another good season, like if he has an overinflated view of himself, I think that's kind of justified. Like, because that's two really good performances, like back to back. There are players who have like gone to arbitration with less.
It is true. There are, and I feel like it would be really hard, to make it for it to go that far. And I feel like there will be a level of respect for both parties. I do believe, and I think what you said is a perfect idea. Getting him in a team friendly 4-year deal, because I think it's good for Hayton in terms of he still gets a decent amount of money based off what his value is. Kind of, who knows what the free agency market is going to look like at that point in terms of who's getting paid based off what he compares himself to.
Sure.
So I don't know exactly what the money is going to look like, but 4 years I think is a comfortable side for both to be like, all right, look, for Hayton in the sense that he is secured for a little bit longer and kind of is able to work on himself to maybe prove himself a little bit more for get an even better contract. And for the Coyotes side, it's like, okay, we can potentially have a contract that's workable. And like, as I mentioned earlier, that in any case that maybe we need to trade or move his contract for any reason whatsoever, because maybe we can't fit his contract on our current roster system, it's easy. It's a team friendly deal that can easily get moved.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. 4 years from now, who do you have as the higher center, Hayton or Geeky?
I just can't see Geeky stay as right now. I could potentially see Geeky move to the wing.
Okay.
I feel like, especially because with Cooley where he is at right now, he's. I mean, Geeky, he could stay as a center potentially. He could also move to but like I said, I can also see him move to the wing pretty easily. Maybe the Coyotes get lucky and get a really good center, wink, wink, in the upcoming draft.
Yeah.
That also changes the game too. Like in that sense, okay, Geeky for sure cannot stay as a center if you have the three solid centers like that in Hayton, potentially this unnamed center, and Logan Cooley. Geeky's got to move to a wing, but that works perfectly out because that just makes a really intense top six.
Yeah, you definitely have a big body in that top six, which I mean, you already have Keller and Cooley, like that's going to be not necessarily the toughest top six in the league. Add Geeky in there, that can do some damage.
So obviously we'll still see. Geeky still has another year to play under the in the juniors. So whether or not he signs or does anything, that still remains to be seen. And when we still need to talk about his development. We'll probably do that sometime this offseason. Where he's at, we'll get a scout in here somewhere and kind of help us break it down to kind of give us a better understanding. But this is an episode about Hayton. And as we run out of time about it, do you have any final thoughts before we close things off?
I've said this before in an episode. I just want to reiterate it. Years ago, I said that Hayton was the better pick over Filip Zadina. I continue to be proven right, and I will relish that. That is like calling a band before they become like a major hit. I called it, and it's the only time that's happened. And I'm gonna take that.
I think there were a couple other people that felt the same way as you. Like they were so happy when Filip Zadina just got buried in Grand Rapids. Just like,
I don't even want that. Like I want Filip Zadina to have like a fine career. I just want Barrett Hayton to be better.
Fair enough. Anyways, we're out of time on this episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnCoyotes, and on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I am personally at Robyn_Leonio. Carl Pavlock is at Carl Pavlock FFH. Interact with us, ask a question you might have. We might answer it right back, or in a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Hope you guys staying safe out there. Hope you guys staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.